Well, where are dinosaurs from? Where are any organisms from? They live in specific environments and then they die in those specific environments. We call these things in geology their environments of deposition, or their EOD. And every geology book anywhere has this figure in it or some similar figure with a whole bunch of lines pointing to different places on the earth, different addresses really, where sediments are being deposited. It's also places where organisms live. So if you think about it, sharks live in the ocean. They live their entire lives in the ocean. They die and their bodies become fossilized there. So they both define and live in the environment of the deep marine, for instance, or these shallow lagoons. If we look around the globe and think about sedimentary environments, we can divide them into three parts. Step back one. We have environments on the continent, on the land. These are the ones that we can walk around in and breathe in, etc. And then we have the ocean environments. And we can go to the ocean, but we can't live there and thrive in there. And then between the two, the line where the beach is here, we have what we call the transitional environment. So we have the land, the oceans, and the transitional. If we look at the continental areas, the ones that are listed here in red are the environments that are most important for dinosaurs. So on the continents, there are river environments, sand dunes, lakes, swamps, glaciers, etc. Dinosaurs didn't necessarily live in lakes or live in swamps or rivers, but they lived near them. They died, and these are places where they stand the best chance of becoming fossilized, as we talked about in the previous slide set. And then the transitional environment, you have deltas. These are places where the rivers meet the ocean. And then you have beaches, tidal flats, lagoons. Deltas are other places where dinosaurs die in the river or the edge of the river. They get dumped here and then they get preserved. And then the marine environment, shallow ocean, deep ocean, reefs, whatever. Notice dinosaurs aren't found in very many of these actual environments. So going back to this slide, they're found along, say, this line, around the edges of this, here in this delta area. But most of the world does not necessarily have dinosaur fossils. We can also use and talk about things called sedimentary structures, and these are other little clues in the rock. So say we find a dinosaur bone, then we also look at the rock that it's entombed in to see if that also gives us other little clues about the environment. So here's one right here, mud cracks. Mud cracks, the top picture is a muddy pond, a little piece of a gutter somewhere with some water and mud in it, and it was wet and then it dried up. The lower picture is an ancient rock that comes from the Triassic period, and actually not too far from the site where this was taken, there are dinosaur trackways. And see, this type of thing happens where there is wet, then dry conditions. That's how it happens today, so that's how it happened in the past. And just as you'd be able to find all kinds of little bird footprints around this sort of mud crack type area here, you can find it as well. So mud cracks indicate this type of wet then dry environment. Ripple marks. Ripples in sand like a modern beach or modern river here indicate that water or wind is flowing. And they actually can indicate the current direction. If they're nice little symmetrical ripples like this upper picture, it just means that the water or the wind sloshes back and forth. But if you have ripples like this with a long low side and then a high steep area, it indicates that water is flowing in a particular direction, like a river, like the environment that we said was so very important for dinosaurs, like along this way. Ripples all along this river system here are going to be asymmetric and pointing downstream towards these ocean deposits. So you can have a rock like this. This is a rock that's many millions of years old. It's in the desert, It's nowhere near a river today. It's nowhere near the ancient ocean basin where it was. But a geologist can look at it and say, ah, this is a ripple. And there was water flowing here and moving towards this or that ancient deposit. Very, very powerful stuff. And then crossbeds. Crossbeds are sort of giant ripples made by either big rivers or wind, and sand dunes. If you were to cut across any sand dune, they would have these things. And so there's a cartoon in the upper picture, there's the lower picture. That's a giant tree on the top of a mountaintop in Utah, and this represents huge, big sand dune type deposits. Dinosaurs are not particularly found right in here, but they're found very near here, indicating again that dinosaurs lived on land and potentially near some very, very dry, deserty type conditions. But mostly we talk about dinosaurs in the context of rivers. And if we are looking at rivers themselves as three separate sub-environments, you have the mountainous areas that have these big things called alluvial fans. There's not much actual water flowing there at any one time. We do have some animals that live there. Some dinosaurs probably lived in these type of things, but they don't get preserved. They get destroyed like those deers on the side of the highway. If you go farther downstream, alluvial fans trend into what we call braided streams, this middle photograph. And these things are places where you have all kinds of sand or mud bars in the middle of the stream. Things are constantly being shifted, deposited here. Imagine an organism, a dinosaur, trying to cross this river, breaking a leg, dying, whatever, dumped in that spot right there. In another day or so, this bar of sediment is going to cover it up and thereby potentially preserve it. So braided streams, potentially good places for dinosaurs. And then way downstream, we get what we call meanders. That's this lower slide. And here, rivers are meandering. They go to the left, to the right, back and forth, back and forth. And when these things flood, they don't just flood around the edge of the river or river gets high. They flood and fill the entire valley. And then potentially anything that lived in this area is caught in the flood or adjacent here gets covered up. And so these meandering streams, I didn't mention it here, but these are the best places to find dinosaur fossils. Also, one thing you can note is that up here in the mountainous areas, alluvial fans, these are coarse gravels and boulders and sands and things. Braided streams are mostly sand, and way down here, mostly mud. And so these are the best places to find fossils of dinosaurs, the plants that the dinosaurs ate, all of these type things. And then finally, this next slide just sort of shows how environment of deposition, the environments where animals lived and then died, control whether we're going to find fossils are there or whether we're even going to, or what type, really. And so here's a similar diagram to that one I showed at the start of this lecture. You've got the ocean deposits here, the land, and then specific types. Now notice it says shallow marine, rare bones. You know, occasionally you're going to have a dinosaur die on the beach or die in the river, get gassed up, and then flow out here. But dinosaur fossils are not found among rocks that we clearly say had or ocean living organisms there. So you're not going to find dinosaur bones associated with coral fossils or shark fossils, things like that. River systems. We also call this fluvial. That's the best. That's why I put it in this enclosure. You have nests, bones, poop, gastroliths. Those are stomach stones, tracks, etc. Lagoons, you have things, deltas, bones and tracks, lacustrine, tracks, bones, etc. So again, some things, some places, some addresses are better than others, better EODs for making fossils, preserving fossils, finding fossils than others.